Okay, so Maya quit on me in my last video, but so I have to maybe rebuild rebuild a little bit of a scene here very quickly. Okay, so like I was saying, let's go ahead and modify and convert to polygons. So these are still kind of tied together, and I wonder about this as well. Okay, so it might not be a bad idea. So there are two ways you can maybe think about working with this, okay? Because this NURBS to poly object is still influenced by its lofted surface, and that lofted surface is still influenced by this curve. So you can either, through display layers, right, select all your, after you've created your surfaces, to create your to create a polygon surface, to convert NURBS to polygons and transform this NURB surface into a polygon surface, and then place all your polygon surfaces in your display layers, and all of your curves in your display layers, let's say in all of your surfaces. So let's put my curves into a display layer, my surface into a display layer, and my NURBS to poly into a display layer. And I can double click here and I can say that this is, poly. So I know what they are. Double click here and surface and curves. Now I might want to turn off the visibility for that surface and perhaps turn on restricted, so I'm not able to select my polygon surface here, but I can still then go in and manipulate my curve and set keys to it so it can move and animate. So that's one way we can think about working with these in unison or as they influence each other, which you might like that particular way of working. Or what I can do, and this is something that we know from if you've done any modeling, right? I have the reason that they're all influencing each other is because they retain those transform node information, so that every operation that I've done to these objects in our scene, it retains that information in our nodal network. NURBS tessellate. So within our surface here, I still have this node that says that I did this operation to transform it into a polygon surface rather than a NURB surface. So the way that I can detach, let's say, or the way that I can make independent all of these objects in my scene is to delete the history of those operations. And by doing this, you really clean up your nodal network. And you're doing this if you're modeling, this isn't a 3D modeling course, but if you are modeling, it's the way that you clean up your models so that you just have just the polygon mesh itself, and it's not retaining every operation you've done to model this thing. So you might want to work with these curves by allowing them to influence each other, and by placing keyframes. You could keyframe the curves. That might be a really nice way to model, but or a really nice way to animate your first animation. But if you don't want them to be connected to each other anymore, you can select all or one, depending, and you can go to Edit and delete all by type history. And once I do this, you saw that one of those nodes just disappeared here. Once I do that, all of these objects are now independent of each other. They no longer retain the information of the operations that have been done to create this particular form. No longer retains the information of this original curve. So those are some ways that you can organize your scene. Those are some ways that you can manage all of the different objects in your scene. The next thing that I want to do in this video is to show you how to animate a camera along a path. I'll just use this curve since I've already scaled it up maybe perhaps. And I'm actually going to change my menu set here. I'm going to go to my animation menu set for this. And let me go ahead and create a camera. Actually, before I create a camera, I'm going to create something else. I'm first going to create a locator. And this locator is the thing I'm going to attach to this path. And I'm going to do that by selecting my locator and then selecting that this curve, right? I'm going to select both of these. And then I'm going to go to constrain and I'm going to say motion path. And I'm going to attach to motion path. And it's going to attach at frame 1 to frame 200, the length of my, or actually, let's see if that changed anything. Since I've done that, it actually, scratch that. It goes from frame, in this case, 1 to frame 120. Because that's what my time slider is showing when I did that operation. And it places this locator at the beginning of my motion path, and by the end of my time slider at 120, that's when this locator will end. So let's go ahead and play this, and you can see how this locator moves along the motion path. So now what I want to do is I'm going to create a camera, and this time I'm going to create a camera and an aim. And so now I have this camera group, and I'm going to move this camera group close to my locator here, basically on top of it, if I can get it on top of it. And then I'm going to middle mouse button and drop it on top of the locator. So now this camera is a child of the parent, which is the locator. So I showed you how in the previous video how to group things together, but you can also parent things, which means that anything that is a child of another object, this is the parent object, this is the child object, the child will inherit the motion of the parent. So let me show you what this looks like. So now this camera will follow the motion of the locator. So why didn't I just go and create a camera and attach it to a motion path? The reason I didn't do that is because I still want to be able to manipulate and keyframe, potentially to have the ability and the control over this camera to be able to key other things about the camera. And if it's attached directly itself to the motion path, then its motion is already set, meaning that there are already keys generated for that camera that can't be overridden. Let me show you what I mean. If I go to my locator here and go to my attribute editor, I have these yellow, it's highlighted in yellow. The rotate and the translate of that locator is in yellow, meaning that we have calculated some keys. There are keys that are procedurally generated from this motion path that are influencing the translate and rotate. So if I want to rotate or translate the camera, which I will want to do, so that I actually can point it maybe at particular objects, I want to have the camera be independent. So I didn't create just a regular camera. I created a camera and an aim. And so this again is another kind of parent-child relationship. I have this camera group, and then I also have a camera, and then I have a camera aim. So these are constrained to each other as well. And how these are constrained, let me zoom in here, is that I have the ability to use my aim as a focus point for my camera. So it's not so, so this is just another way that I can control the camera that I find I may have a little bit more control over, to control it by using this aim rather than rotating the camera itself and keying the camera's rotation and translation. I can key the aim, so the point in space which the camera is pointing at. I can also ungroup these, right? And I can just right click and pull this out. And I can, let's say I have another object, and I know you're going to be working with surfaces and not with polygon primitives, but just for fun, let me go ahead and throw this sphere to make it easy. Let me throw this sphere into the scene and let me key its position over 120. Let me key. So now I have this sphere is doing this kind of motion. What I can do is, if I'm on frame 1 here, let me go ahead and move my camera aim on top of this sphere so that my aim is pointed directly at the sphere. And I might have to move my, toggle around my scene to be able to get it kind of on top there. And now if I middle mouse click and actually make this aim a child of the sphere, the camera will point at the sphere for the entire animation. Or, for this particular camera, its aim will be constrained to this sphere. So these are all ways that we can control the way that the camera operates, so that we don't have to keyframe every single frame. It's taking some of the kind of tedium of animating out of it and making it a little bit easier to be able to control these things from a programmatic approach. Okay, so that's motion paths and animating. Animating cameras along a motion path. We've covered surfaces, and those are a lot of the tools that I want you to work with for this first project, and I think we can create really interesting animations using that. The next set of video tutorials will talk about texturing and also some stuff with the graph editor. And then we will wrap up this week with exporting your image renders and then creating your MP4 file.